All right, do you think that Bitcoin would get to $1 million? Would it ever get to $1 million? Or would gold get to $1 million per kilo? Because both are now at 100,000 per kilo of gold and 100,000 per Bitcoin. Who would get there faster? It's funny, we're talking about this on a historical day today because we've just had Moody's downgrade US government rating. And now look at this. Look at this, folks. This is truly historic. US 10-year yield is over 4.5% now. And US 30-year yield is 5% now, right? And closing in on 4% for the US 2-year yield. What does all that mean? You might think, oh, that's just mumble jumble, but these things matter absolutely for Bitcoin, crypto, and the stock market. Basically, we can talk about it for the short term or for the long term. In the very short term, if these US 10-year rate spikes up, then which is caused partly by the Moody's downgrade, then basically it means there's not much more liquidity. There's not much more liquidity in the market, right? It means we're not in an easy money environment because businesses then would cost them like 5%, 4.5% just to borrow money. A lot more than that because it would cost the US government 5% to borrow money, and then it would cost businesses like 8%, 7%, 9% to borrow some money. So that's not good for the NASDAQ, and what's not good for the NASDAQ is not good for Bitcoin. Before we go on to today's massive episode, I'm going to talk about who can get to $1 million faster, right? If both will ever get to $1 million. Bitcoin to $1 million, is that possible? And gold to $1 million per kilo, is that possible? Both are at 100K right now. Before we get onto that big debate, I'm going to tell you guys some information that you've never heard of because other people don't tell you the truth about Bitcoin and gold. I'm going to tell you the truth today. Let's just have a look at where Bitcoin is at in the short term. We've had this pop and everyone got excited, and this was basically the big pop that everyone thought was going to do a big run up. Now, the fact that Bitcoin is coming down like this is quite early in the trading day. If it closes today on the Monday, so like here, like below this 102.9 level, then it means we've got a bearish reversal candle. It's reversed the entire gains of the previous day. Then that makes things very difficult, and it means chances are we're going to get some serious pullback here. Because have a look so far, we've not had a big bearish candle yet on this big rally up from 73K. So look at these red bars. None of them are a bearish reversal candle. That took like 2 days. Whereas this one would be a bearish reversal candle. So that's not good for the short term. So we hope it can close above 102, this 103K area to at least avoid a bearish reversal candle. But overall the crypto funding is actually not red hot. So there are like 2 or 3 reasons. We see lots of greens and lots of blacks here, right? The reds are the ones we need to watch out. That means, like there's too much longs, too much long leverage going on. See, the thing is, there are like 3 things that can make the market crash and do a big pullback. One is, the most obvious one is futures funding. When futures funding is too red or too many longs, then basically exchanges flush the market. Bitcoin down 10%. That's one of those big 10% crash days, and altcoins go down like 25, 30%. We're not seeing that right now. So that's not going to be the reason. The other reason is if the spot buyers start selling. By spot, I mean the whales who bought Bitcoin around 74K, around 75, 76K, they feel like Bitcoin's not going to make a new all-time high, or even if it does, I better hedge my bets and sell some here. If they sell in large amounts at this double top area around 106K area, then that could also cause Bitcoin to sag and pull back. But we're not going to see a 10% crash scenario. That usually only happens with futures. Or the third scenario is the crazy world of Trump. Basically, this didn't used to happen before, but if Trump tweets something, suddenly, comes up with a sudden new bright idea, then what could happen is the market could flush down. Both the NASDAQ and stocks could take a big dump, and then that would take Bitcoin down as well. So we're watching that closely on the daily for the daily close. The weekly close was very good, closed at highest weekly close ever at 106K. So I just feel like a lot of games will be played here. But before we go any further, first let's answer the question of which crypto exchange does Pablo Jimenez use? Well, Pablo uses this exchange that's non-KYC. That means you don't need to show any ID. That means you basically, the exchange can't even see who you are. So of course, then the Americans can use it. That means the IRS can't see you, the tax office can't see you, CIA, FBI, nobody can see you. So this is my deal with them. The Pablo Jimenez link only, just by depositing, receive up to $200 US, and by trading, win up to $35,000 US. But for a limited time only, finishes on June 4th, right? Chance to win a Tesla Model 3, Rolex watch, Apple Vision Pro, and Sony. All these great prizes. So if you're watching this on YouTube, then the link is in the description below. The link is in the description below. But if you're watching it on any other platform such as this one, then just go and click on my profile page. It should be right here on the Stan link right there. Should be the first thing that pops up. Okay, let's get back to the markets because this is a great deal. And just keep in mind, folks, only on the Pablo Jimenez link. Okay, now with Bitcoin, so my overall impression for the short term is that I think we get some sort of cup and handle pattern, which is cup and handle, like a pullback like this, sort of a bull flag. We dip down below 100, right? But not much, as long as the futures stay green, and then boom, big new leg up. But I really don't want to see this bearish engulfing pattern here. I want to see us to close above 103K. If we close below 103K, then probably the pullback gets deeper. Like it can probably retest this 92K area. So on the longer term though, for the reason why I say today is historic is that for Bitcoin to go to 1 mil, if it can go to 1 mil, we basically need, I've always said this, and for gold to go to 1 mil as well per kilo, what does that even mean? What's that measured in? Are you saying 1 million, for gold to go to 1 million Japanese yen? It's already there. The Bitcoin's already way over 1 million Japanese yen. In Korean won, in Vietnamese dong, in the euro, in UK, in the pound, or in the Chinese RMB. We're talking going to 1 million in US dollars. The way that would happen would be a collapse in US dollar, right? I've often said before, we're going to see within the next 5 years, I said this 2 years ago, that we're going to see a major US dollar crisis. I didn't use the word collapse, but perhaps it's still polite to use the word confidence crisis. And we're seeing that now because, so today, what we're seeing is basically US 10-year rate and US 30-year rate hit these key benchmarks, 4.5% and 5%. And that usually means basically when yields spike up, it means the price of bonds are being sold. US government treasury bonds are being sold, right? And it's just a reflection that people don't have confidence in the US treasury government system. If people don't have confidence in the US government, then why are you holding US dollars? I keep on showing folks this in my Discord and in my videos as well, that someone like Warren Buffett even said Bitcoin is that US dollar could be a currency that's going to hell. Could be, he says. And the reason why I show that is because Warren Buffett is actually very much a patriot. Even he is saying stuff like this. So now the problem, we all know why, people watching this channel are usually really into crypto or Bitcoin. So the reason why you don't need me to tell you any more about why Bitcoin is great. We've already heard a lot of the reasons why from Bitcoin maxis. That's why you're in crypto. That's why you're in Bitcoin. So I'm going to be honest with you guys and tell you some of the reasons why Bitcoin could be a problem that Bitcoin maxis don't tell you about. And it's key to keep those things in mind. So one that I often talk about a lot is that Bitcoin often mimics the stock market. It's got a high correlation with the stock market. If you look back on the charts, basically the NASDAQ bottomed exactly April the 4th, 7th as well. NASDAQ is bounced back to near new all-time highs as well. Bitcoin, this pullback could just be waiting for the NASDAQ. If NASDAQ doesn't do a new breakthrough to confirm to new all-time high, maybe Bitcoin doesn't either. So it could be as simple as that. Bitcoin is better than gold in that, in one of the many regards, in that you can transport Bitcoin quite easily. Gold is quite heavy, like one kilo of gold is $100,000. So even just to move $1 million US, you need 10 kilos of gold. Like imagine carrying a briefcase with 10 kilo brick of gold, of some metal, through the airport. You get taxed. When you go to a place like Dubai, like Malaysia, they tax you 14%. They're like, oh, you've brought in $1 million of gold. Here's $140,000 in tax. Imagine that. But going forward, Bitcoin has three other threats that mostly gold doesn't have. Now, first of all, Bitcoin basically depends on the hash rate. And I've spoken about, okay, first of all, the obvious one is quantum computing. When quantum computing comes along, maybe, well, not maybe, we do know that a Bitcoin cryptography, which uses this CIA standard of SHA-237, SHA-237. It's a cryptography standard that the CIA came up with. And that basically means it can be cracked, but I've made long videos about this before, so I'm not going to dive into it here. Bitcoin needs to do a hard fork, and when you do a hard fork, to be quantum resistant, you lose something like 30 to 50% of all Bitcoins. So imagine that. And second of all, BlackRock might own enough Bitcoin that when you do a hard fork, they might be able to weigh in and say, we recognize, when you fork, they might be able to say, we recognize this chain as the new Bitcoin. This old chain is, that's not, this other chain that most of these plebs, average, ordinary citizens that's not Bitcoin for us. They might be powerful enough to actually swing that. Because Bitcoin has forked at least twice in short history of 15 years already. You had Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash. These all actually came from the Bitcoin blockchain. They just decided to choose where more than 50% of the activity is happening, of the mining is happening, where the hash rate is, to call that the new Bitcoin. Some people might say Bitcoin Cash was actually the real Bitcoin, because in the white paper written by Satoshi Nakamoto, remember his first line, if you read that white paper of Bitcoin, he says Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer, right, electronic payment system. That's what Bitcoin Cash is. You could argue he never said, well, he definitely never said Bitcoin's a store of value or digital gold. He never said that. And you could argue the current Bitcoin, whether we have today or Bitcoin Cash, who is the real Bitcoin? That's not an argument I'm going into today. But one more thing I'm going to point out is who controls Bitcoin? If you control the hash rate, you control Bitcoin. Like with any proof of mining blockchain, if you control 51% of the hash, you can do what's called a 51% hash attack. You can reverse transactions. You can jam block the entire network so nothing happens. Now, that means whoever's got the cheapest electricity in the world controls Bitcoin. And who has the cheapest electricity in the world? Well, China. China controlled Bitcoin. Basically, it had 70 to 80% of the hash rate in the world was coming from China by mid-2020, because they have the second cheapest electricity in the world, and 99% of all Bitcoin mining machines, the RSIC mining machines, come from China. China decided to ban Bitcoin mining because it costs too much electricity, so they kicked all the Bitcoin miners out. But one day, because China develops EVs and EVs and basically solar power at exponential rate, they will have the cheapest electricity in the world by far. They're going to manufacture 99% of the world's Bitcoin mining machines as well. They already do. So if China wants to, if Bitcoin goes to $500,000 or $1 million, and China wants to control Bitcoin network because it's so valuable now, they easily could. It's basically two companies. One's called Bitmain. It's founded by a guy called Wu Jihan. He got kicked out, and so he started his own little company called Bitdeer. They both dominate something like 95% of the Bitcoin miners machines market. So there you go. Now, gold. I just want to show you guys the chart of gold. Gold has, I've spoken plenty of good things about gold, but here is one risk we need to be aware of if we are into gold, and that risk is called government suppression. So this is the price of gold, but government, US government, conspiracy theories say, has been suppressing the price of gold for a long time. And we can see here, the reason why Bitcoin was invented, you could say, and why Bitcoin has done so well is because gold hasn't done its job. So here was why Bitcoin was invented in basically late 2009, when the US was doing massive QT, quantitative easing, printing of money, so to speak. And then basically gold ran up from, what was it, just below $1,000 to $2,000. It only went up 2x, right? When the US government is doing so much money printing, there's so much inflation in the world, so you would think you want an asset that would go up a lot. And that's what Bitcoin has done. It's protected a lot of people. But then look, gold topped. Let me move this up just a little so folks can see the dates of the chart. So gold topped in 2000. This is 2011, in mid 2011, and then it basically spent all that time down in this big bear bottom, right? For 10 years, as the governments did QE around the world, central banks printed money, gold went nowhere and then went flat here. So you could say you had no protection for those 10, 12 years. Like inflation's going pretty rampant in a lot of countries, and yet gold didn't protect you during that time. Well, especially if you're a US citizen, because in Turkey, yes, gold protected you because gold didn't move, but it's measured in US dollars. But in if you're a US citizen, gold didn't protect you much because it basically only came back to $2,000, which was like the price from 13 years ago. And then found this breakout, and it went to $35,000. So a decent move, but you could say, what if this government suppression happens again in the future? Well, the news I've got for you guys is that right now, one other country, one other major superpower is actually trying to use gold to back its new currency and trading system. And that country is called China. China's basically has this Shanghai Gold Exchange and is basically created a new vault in Hong Kong. And it's created another vault in Saudi Arabia. There's some big rumors about Saudi Arabia. That one hasn't been confirmed yet, but in Shanghai, so far it's happening. So what does that mean? Well, it basically means that in the system that China's trying to create to trade with the world, right? Because countries like Russia are being kicked off the SWIFT system, so they can't trade in US dollars. But before then, everything trades in US dollars. Even now, China trades in US dollars. So basically, China is being threatened by Trump to be kicked off the SWIFT system, trading system as well. So China's basically saying, okay, we're going to create this new system where we trade, for example, in oil with Saudi Arabia. And I pick Saudi Arabia as the most important example because that's where petrol comes from, hence the petrol dollar. So they trade with Saudi Arabia in petrol, and they used to pay US dollars every time via SWIFT. Every time they buy something from Saudis and vice versa, Saudis buy something from China, they also pay US dollars, both countries. But now what they do is they say, we don't pay each other US dollars, we just make a ledger, make a record of, okay, you bought this much oil, I bought this much solar panels and EVs from China. And then at the end of the month, we just tally it and see, oh, what's the difference in our trade? It's just the net difference is actually quite small. It's not $100 billion, it's only like $3 billion. Okay, then China says, I owe you, Saudi Arabia, $3 billion. But you don't trust RMB, you don't trust the yuan because it's not as powerful as the US dollar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you $3 billion worth of gold. Would you trust that? And Saudis say, yes, I trust that, but I can't go into China and get a Hercules airplane or whatever and airlift those gold bars out of China because, it's nobody can do that from China. Like you got the second most powerful military in the world. So China says, then would you trust me if I was to open a branch of the Shanghai Gold Exchange in Hong Kong, Singapore, London, and maybe Dubai and Saudi Arabia? So then it's inside your territory, inside your jurisdiction, and then you can, when we trade, then you can just come in and just take those gold bars from me, and then you can be confident and feel 100% safe when you trade with China. So that is the plan that nobody's talking about except Pablo. I'm telling you guys these insider info that nobody else has. That's what China's planning to do, and that will bring back gold from being this irrelevant piece of metal from some rocks into this currency again that's going to be back in the international trade system, being promoted by BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and the global south, with countries such as Saudi Arabia. And that is the key, because Saudi Arabia only sells oil in US dollars since 1972, which is the linchpin to this entire petrodollar system. Once that breaks, once you're selling oil in gold or RMB, the Chinese yuan, then the monopoly of the US dollar system, petrodollar system breaks. Then with like $37 trillion in debt, $40 trillion in debt from the US government, and then we basically have that massive crisis in confidence, then that's when we see the Chinese Bitcoin can possibly go to much higher, 300,000, 400,000. Crazy numbers are then possible. Then gold per kilo can then go to crazy numbers like 500,000, 1 mil, whatever. Gold, in that case, is coming back, the return of the king. Like the Lord of the Rings movie, Return of the King. Okay, thank you for your time, folks. Catch you for the next episode.